All right, I got to admit, I'm a little nervous about talking about this particular film. I always knew this one was coming. When I first began the idea for Forgotten Gems, when this whole quarantine lockdown situation happened, and I went over to my movie wall and I was picking out titles that I kind of wanted to feature, this is one of the first ones that I pulled out. And I really want to talk about this movie, but at the same time, I'm kind of afraid to talk about this movie. And the reason is because this movie is very different from all the other ones that I've covered, and probably all the ones I'm going to cover still. This is not just some cute little picture that I remember watching a lot as a kid on HBO, or, some cute relic of its time that has kind of fallen out of memory. When I'm talking about this movie, what I'm talking about is one of my favorite movies of all time. One of the movies that did that thing that we are all hoping whenever we experience any kind of artistic expression, be it a painting, a sculpture, a song, a piece of music, a book, a play, a TV show, or a movie. What we're looking for and what we tend to latch onto are those pieces that feel like somehow, some way, they parted the sea of all the other people viewing it and reached out and said to us, this was made for you. So you have that element, and then you have the additional element of sometimes a piece of work comes along exactly when you need it to come along. I remember when Muppets Most Wanted came out, and I was feeling really bummed about having to direct another kids show. And I went and saw that movie, and Kermit is thrown into the gulag, and he's forced to direct the variety show. He doesn't want to do it, so they stick him to the wall, and one of the characters looks at him and goes, just direct the show, you're never going to escape. And I felt like that line was written just for me. It was right when I needed to hear it, right from the source I needed it to come from. And in 1995, I don't remember exactly what month this came out. I was either a freshman or a sophomore in high school. I had a nice, stable group of friends, but I was in no way, shape, or form a popular kid. I know, it's crazy to look at me now and think that. But yes, believe it or not, I was not what you would consider one of the cool kids. I know. Today, I am the benchmark of coolness and hipness. But back then, that just goes to show you, kids, doesn't matter. You could grow up to be just like me too someday. Doesn't matter where you start. But, I wasn't in the inner circle. And we all have that feeling of, aimlessness in high school. And for the folks who aren't, or at least feel like they aren't in that popular clique, I think that feeling of aimlessness can be even more intense. And lo and behold, that year a film came out that just, again, everything parted, and I saw this movie and it felt like it was talking to me. It's become one of the most influential movies on me of all time, and one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'm speaking of 1995's Angus. I love this movie so much that one of the first plays I wrote in college, I named the main character Angus after this movie. One of the reasons I'm a little nervous about it is there is a lot I want to say about this movie. This is probably going to be a longer episode, so buckle up. We're in for quite the journey. And I want to make sure I do it justice. So let's just start. Let's just jump right in here. Let's just, let's be like Angus and face fear and tackle it head on. So first of all, let's talk about the story. So our title character, Angus Bethune, played by Charlie Talbert, is a high school freshman. He is a fat kid. He's a fat kid who's good at science and fair at football, is his own description. He lives with his mother, played by Kathy Bates, and his grandfather, played by George C. Scott. He has his best friend, Troy, played by Chris Owen, who is also kind of an oddball. I don't even know how to describe the character of Troy. We'll talk about him in a little bit. And all of his life, apart from Troy, Angus has had two primary relationships with his peer group that we are privy to. First, he has been in love since day one with the beautiful cheerleader Melissa Lefebvre, played here by Jurassic Park's own Ariana Richards. Note that I've said he's been in love with her, not that he's ever actually spoken to her. It has been a pining affection from afar, a very Niles Daphne type of thing, if Niles never actually spoke to Daphne. Complicating this relationship is the third, and that is the bully who has been tormenting Angus most of his life, and that is Rick, played by a pre-Dawson's Creek James Vanderbeek, who has kind of been the thorn in Angus's side since kindergarten. Well, the main thrust of the story is that Rick, as a joke, and knowing how Angus feels about Melissa, sets it up so that at the big dance coming up, because every high school movie ends at a big dance, Melissa is voted the Winter Ball Queen, and Angus is voted the Winter Ball King. So Angus, who has spent his entire life pining for this girl and wanting one moment, and it's a big through line here in this film, that concept of wanting one moment, now has to decide, is he going to go take that moment and by doing so play into the joke that's being perpetrated on him, or is he going to back out and lose that opportunity forever? And the movie, there's a big stretch here, it's a very Hamlet kind of thing. The movie is about him weighing the decisions and going back and forth on what he's going to do and what's the best thing versus what he wants, what's going to be the best thing for him academically, personally, and growth into an adult. So, on the surface, sounds like a pretty standard high school movie. But one of the things that makes this movie so good is that it sounds like a typical high school movie, but almost everything about it, from the characters to the setting to the visual language of it, it is so unbelievably different and ever so slightly subversive to the entire teen movie genre. What's funny about it is that historically, the movie Angus, if you think of the high school movie genre as a high school, the movie Angus is a lot like the character Angus. It's kind of the outcast. It's the one that doesn't quite fit in. And this goes all the way to the core of the picture. One of the things I never realized about this movie until last night, and I've seen this movie hundreds of times, but watching it last night, it suddenly dawned on me how different this movie looks from every other high school movie that was out at the time, and a lot of them that have come out since. First of all, the high school and the town that this takes place in is not this big, fancy, place. It's not. It doesn't take place in New York or California or Seattle. It's not some trendy city. It takes place somewhere in the Midwest. It doesn't. They never actually give a location to where the movie actually takes place. At least not that I remember. So the high school feels a lot like a high school, The students are not 20-some-year-olds pretending to be high school students. They're actual teenagers. The actors are not, despite what James Van Der Beek would kind of become with Dawson's Creek as a success, these are not these supermodel gorgeous people, you know, traipsing around their high school. And this isn't Clueless or 10 Things I Hate About You or She's All That. You know, the school bully doesn't drive to school in a convertible. You know, they look and feel and are represented by actual kids. And therefore, this movie, more than any other high school movie I have ever seen, is truly the closest it has come to replicating my high school experience. I watch this film and I feel like I'm back in high school in a good way. You know, the Letterman jackets, the fashion, the different sizes and shapes of the kids, and they're all kids. I never felt like this movie was pandering to me. So right away, from the look and the feel of it, a much warmer feel than a lot of the other ones. The color palette is a lot of earth tones, very warms, a lot of blues, a lot of reds, browns, darker greens. This is a much more grounded film than a lot of its contemporaries, which all are very flat and plastic and flashy. So right away, the visual language of this movie is already telling you this is not like anything you have seen. It's much more real, and therefore the story we're trying to tell you is going to be a lot more real than any of the ones that you've ever come across. And I think that is the next secret of this movie's, at least in my idea of success, is how real and how layered the characters of this film are. Let's talk right away. Let's just jump right in and talk about our main character. Let's talk about Angus Bethune, as played by Charlie Talbert, in a great role. This was his first movie, and he did an awesome job. And especially when you consider that he's sharing the screen with 3 Oscar winners in this movie. So, I mean, that I don't know how that must have felt, but I know I would have been intimidated as hell. The character of Angus is unlike any character, especially this type of stereotypical or stock character that we've seen in the high school movies. The nerd, the geek, the outcast. And it's what they chose to include. First of all, in just terms of the makeup of his personality, Angus is not this scrawny little, he's not a Daniel LaRusso, you know, he's not a nerdlinger, you know, he's not an Urkel. He's a big kid, he's intelligent, he's athletic, he's on the football team. So his interests are varied. He is not in the box that a lot of these stereotypical characters are always put into, the things that make them stereotypical. But what's also interesting, and this is where the subversive element comes in, is that by doing that, they right away, in like one of the first scenes of the movie, cut the legs out of one of the most popular nerd fantasies. Or not, nerd fantasy is the wrong word. Let's say the bully. And before we get into that discussion, I just have to say this. Before anybody comes at me with where you get off talking about bullying, let me tell you something. I was a male figure skater in Alaska, one of the hockey capitals of the States. And I wore Star Trek pins on my Letterman jacket. Trust me, folks, I know bullying. I know bullying from first grade all the way up to graduation. Believe you me, again, one of the reasons this movie really speaks to me. But what is one of those great fantasies of the bullied? Think about the Karate Kid. What is the ultimate fantasy of that movie? Someday, if I train hard enough, I can defend myself, and then they'll be sorry. then they won't pick on me because I can physically defend myself. But here's the thing. Angus already does. One of the first scenes of the movie, Rick calls him fat. They're in kindergarten. Rick calls him fat, and Angus punches him in the face and breaks his nose. It becomes a running gag throughout the movie. You broke his nose, Angus! Rick sets him up, and Angus punches him in the face. That immediate reaction, that thing that every nerd dreams of, that thing that every bullied kid dreams of, if I could defend myself, they wouldn't pick on me, immediately doesn't work. He can defend himself, but it doesn't make his life better. It's a very Peter Parker thing. The superpowers that you dream of don't make your life better. They don't end the bullying. So if that doesn't work, what does? And that's part of what he has to discover going through this. Along with that, going with the fact that he is the one who can defend himself, Angus has character flaws. I remember once, I went and saw one of my former students in a production that their high school put on, or maybe it was a junior high, I don't know, either way. And their drama teacher had written the play, and it was a musical about bullying. And you can tell it was coming from a very genuine place. I'm not trying to mock the genuine emotion. I will mock the writing. Because our main character in that, this bullied kid, was basically Jesus come to earth. He was the perfect, most wonderfulest, most angelic child that ever was. Why do people bully me? I shall turn every cheek that there is. Oh, why? And you tend to see in movies and specials about bullying, that is often the path that the writers take, that the bullied person is this perfect, innocent child. This is not me saying that anybody who is bullied deserves it, but nobody is perfect. Angus is not perfect. He, as we've demonstrated, he has a hot temper. Half the time, he throws the first punch. You know, Rick doesn't come at him, he comes at Rick. He's a bit of a whiner. He takes things for granted. These are not bad things, because what they do is they make him human. He is a much more relatable character than just about any in any high school movie I can ever think of. Because he's allowed to have flaws. Flaws that he either needs to acknowledge or overcome. Like I said, the tendency to fly off the handle and punch his bully, doesn't work time after time. He has to think of a new way. So yeah, big ups to Charlie Talbert for creating this character, and making him so, just so appealing. So you have those aspects. You also have, he's a very funny kid. He's got great comic timing. He and George C. Scott have these great back and forths, just wonderful bits. I also really appreciate that this film, more than any other, understands, I'm using this term a lot, but I'm using it as a shorthand. It understands nerd friendship and what that really means. The friendship and relationship between Angus and his best friend Troy is one of the most genuine relationships, again, that I've ever seen in a movie of this type. Shows like The Big Bang Theory, one of the things I really hate about that show is not the nerd face that a lot of people accuse it of, though I don't like that. But what I really dislike about it is that it doesn't understand nerd friendship or outcast friendship. When you are an outcast and you find a friend, someone that is on your wavelength, that one person that seems to understand your sense of humor or your worldview or whatever, that person becomes ride or die. Blood, baby. I can tell you right now, I have been best friends with my best friend from junior high. We've been best friends for 20 years plus. and we have been through everything together. And yeah, we get on each other's nerves. Yeah, we shoot insults back and forth. Yeah, I've pissed him off and he's pissed me off. But end of the day, it is deeply ingrained in outcast friendships. It is us against the world. And I may be mad at you, but I would much rather face this world with you than without you. And that is the great thing about Troy and Angus's friendship. They get on each other's nerves. They yell at each other. They insult each other. They betray each other throughout the course of the film. But they always forgive each other and come back to each other because that's your lifeline. That's your best friend. And a lot of movies don't understand that friendship. And you really feel it with this. They also go that way with one of the other big characters in this, and that is the girl, Melissa Lefebvre, as played by Ariana Richards. Ariana Richards, my high school crush. Since the moment I saw Jurassic Park, buddy. Everybody else had Pamela Anderson in their lockers. I had a Jurassic Park playing card. Actually, I didn't have that in my locker, but I had it. I had it up on my wall in my room. Jurassic Park playing card of her, because it was the Queen of Hearts. Boy, high school was a long time ago. Anyway, here's the thing about the girl, the hot girl, the pretty girl, whatever you want to call her, the popular girl, the nerdy girl, whatever archetype we're working with. The girl in a lot of these teen movies is not a character. She is an object. She is the trophy, the thing to be won, the thing to be obtained. Get that popular girl nerd and your life is gonna be better. That girl's gonna see you for who you really are, and she's gonna fall in love with you. They never really get into the nerd seeing her for who she really is. And once again, this is where Angus is slightly subversive. Angus idolizes Melissa Lefebvre, but he idolizes her as exactly that, an object. Something to be pined over, to be chased after, and the feeling of getting her and winning. And that is not a negative trait on him as a character. That is the mindset of a teenage boy that we hopefully grow out of if we're smart. And I don't know if it's any different now. I know teenagers and young people are a lot more woke and sensitive than we were back in the 90s. But, I can tell you, especially from an outcast point of view, that seeing that pretty girl across the lunchroom and, wishing you had a way to tell her all these great things about you and that how to get her to see you the way you want to be seen, it's a primal thing in a lot of young men, and in that outcast person especially. So Angus follows that. But here's again where the movie throws us the curveball. When Angus finally does talk to Melissa, what we find out is that Melissa is not perfect either. She is, in fact, a broken person. We find in a really great speech, and this is why, again, I bring up Ariana Richards and just how good of an actor she was, especially for a child actor. In a really heartbreaking speech, we find out Melissa Lefebvre is bulimic. So she has been carrying, and she even says that you're the only person I've ever told. So we find out that this seemingly perfect person, this person that Angus has idolized and worshipped and desired all this time, is not a statue to be put up on the wall and gazed at. She's a human being with problems, with a backstory. We don't know why she's bulimic, what's caused her to be bulimic. Where that pressure comes from. Is it society? Is it family? What is it? we don't know, and he doesn't know. And he learns that, and in that moment, it is not just the typical get the girl and your story arc is complete. It is make a connection with a person, and through that connection, you grow as a person, and they grow as a person. And that is one of the things I truly love about this movie. It's not a simple answer. Even when you get the thing, pardon the language there, that you think you desire, you're not getting a thing. It's a person. It's a human being. And when you love someone, you love them warts and all. Always and forever. And first thing you got to acknowledge is that if they're going to accept your faults, you need to accept theirs. This also goes into the ending of the film, where Angus and Melissa do not, as far as we know, they don't end up together. He walks her home, she kisses him on the cheek, and she goes inside, and the last shot is him walking away and her peering out the window at him. And him doing this voiceover, this narration that he's been doing throughout the film of, you know, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna do more, and maybe she actually likes me. We don't know what happens to them after this. They may never speak to each other again. They may start dating. They may just become really great friends. But the fact of the matter is, they have made that connection. I also really love, I've been tiptoeing around it, let's get right to it, there's a good segue. I love the message of this movie. Throughout the film, one of the things that they are trying to say, aside from the concept of there is no normal, is and accepting yourself for who you are and not worrying about if the rest of the world accepts you, forcing them to accept you kind of thing, is this concept of go have your moment. Go have that moment where you're on top of the world. Go have that moment where you have won. We all want that. And that's what he's going for. That's the dialogue they use a lot in this movie is, I want my moment. I just want one moment with her. I've been waiting for that moment. And what I love about the ending of this movie and the narration he gives at the end is that he says, I had my moment, and then I heard my grandpa's voice tell me, now go have another. Because I think that is something that a lot of these films do, and I think it does damage, if you want my honest opinion. Especially now as a teacher of high school, I can tell you one of the things I have the hardest time convincing students of is that this high school, it is not the be-all and end-all of your existence. It's an important chapter of your life. It's not the last chapter. And it is great to have your moment in high school, to have that starring role in the play, or to make that winning touchdown, or to be voted this or that, or win the state championship. Those moments are phenomenal. But you can't be satisfied and just go, well, I peaked. You had that moment. Now go have another one. And have more and more wonderful moments. And I think so many of the high school movies that were out, especially back then, really focused on the high school is the most important time of your life. It's the best time of your life, you know, kind of thing. And this film, already taking an anti-that kind of stance by the fact that the character is not having a great time in high school, further combats it by saying, yeah, you had that great moment, but life isn't over. Don't be satisfied with just the one. Go for the next one. And that's a message I don't think gets across enough, and I think we need to push that a bit more. So, a really talented cast of, at the time, young people. They're all in their 40s like I am now. But a great cast of, at the time, very young actors. Some of them on the brink of stardom. Some of them in their first film. But, you know, backing them up is a really amazing, like 3 fucking Oscar winners in this. You know, Kathy Bates, George C. Scott, and Rita Moreno has a cameo as a dance teacher in this really great comic bit where she's trying to teach Angus to dance, and the comic and the joke being he's so big and so, you you know, and so uncoordinated that keeps hurting people. And it's you know, I've had that moment. I had that moment dancing with someone at a wedding where I was so big, I was afraid I was going to hurt the person. It was my cousin. Yeah, Kathy Bates is phenomenal. She's so warm and so loving in that role of his mother, a single mother, herself not considered normal. But it's really George C. Scott who is the, you know, the Uncle Ben, kind of the Uncle Ben if he was drinking kind of thing. Even though he never drinks in the movie, but he's got a much surlier attitude than Uncle Ben kind of has. He himself not being normal by traditional standards. He's getting ready to marry a 30-year-old. He's 73. But he's the one who gives some of these great speeches in the film that really stuck with me. He gives one, and it's now, I know most people probably know it by now, but he gives this one to Angus, and he says, you know, Superman's not brave. You know, he's handsome, he's strong, he's even a decent person, but he isn't brave because he's indestructible. And you can't be brave when you're indestructible. It's the people who can be crushed and know it, but they keep going out there every time. Man, I cannot tell you. The fact that I know that speech pretty much from memory should tell you how much that moment stuck with me as a kid and how much I've kind of thought about that speech and those moments since then. Because, man, that dialogue really got lodged in my noggin and hasn't left in 20-some years since I saw this movie. But yeah. You know who else deserves a real quick shout out? Actually, a couple people, but we'll get to them in a second. His fiance, who was played by Anna Thompson, who's only in 2 scenes. We never meet her until the actual wedding. But she's only in 2 scenes, but boy, is she good. You know, and then again, it's another character that, even amongst the people who are not considered normal, isn't considered normal by them. You know, and she does a really great job. She has a really heartbreaking scene with Angus after the wedding that just, like, it just, you know, heartbroken. Yeah, so as you can tell, I have thought about this movie a lot. So now we got to ask the question that we always got to ask. Is this movie perfect? No, it isn't. It's great, but it's not perfect. There are some places where I think they could have edited or trimmed things down. Let's start with the little ones first. So Angus has 2 We Band of Brothers, This Is Me speeches in this movie. The first one he is, actually technically 3, but the first being when he's being interviewed by the science school that he's applied to, and the second at the prom, or at the winter ball dance, kind of the final showdown with Rick, where he kind of gets in his face and gives him this big, I don't care if I'm not normal speech. Both are good speeches. Charlie Tauber does an excellent job with both of them. The thing is that that's 2 of those speeches, very similar, very close together in the film. And I honestly think the movie could have survived with just one This Is Me speech. And if I had to cut one, I'd cut the second one. Because I think after Angus goes to the dance, he has his dance with Melissa, he has his moment with her. I don't think he needs a confrontation with Rick to tell Rick off. I think he told Rick off by his actions. He's already won. I don't think he needed... the speech is great, again, and for, again, being a kid at that time and hearing that speech, it really got me geared up. But, you know, objectively, I think maybe they could have done without that speech. I mentioned that I liked Troy and the Troy-Angus friendship. But I'm going to say that I think Troy, as a character, he's a little too much of an oddball. Again, one of the things I really liked about this movie is how grounded it is and how real the characters feel. Troy feels just a little too, I don't know, he's a little too gross, a little too, he's a little too much of an oddball. He doesn't like to shower, he's picking his ears, he's constantly talking about getting a boner. I think he's a little too much. I think they could have toned him back a little bit. There's one character I haven't talked about, and I'm going to talk about him now because I think he is one of the great things about this movie, but he's also one of the things that's a minor problem with it, and that is Rick Sanford, as played by, again, a pre-Dawson's Creek James Vanderbeek. I have no bad things to say about his performance. He is the perfect bully, snotty asshole character. He is every bully I have ever had. And his relationship to Angus is exactly that same relationship, wherein we all think of bullies, again, using the Karate Kid example, of these people who physically torment you. But Rick is a much smarter bully. He eggs Angus on. Angus flies off the handle. Rick never touched him. Rick didn't do anything. So Angus gets in trouble. That's the way those bullies operated. James Vanderbeek did such a great job in this role that this was a year or two before he was on Dawson's Creek, where he was playing the sensitive movie nerd. And I remember, because Dawson's Creek came on right after Buffy, and I'm a Buffy fan, so I would watch Buffy, and then Dawson's Creek would come on, and the minute, I remember the very first episode, because I just left the TV on, I was doing my homework, and I just left it on for background noise, and it came on, and I looked up, and there he was, and I turned that TV off. I hated that guy, because he had played such a great villain. So this is nothing to do with his performance. His performance was fantastic. But in terms of the characters, one of the things I mentioned is that this movie and all its characters and whatnot are slightly subversive. They give you the archetype, but then they twist it a little bit. They change it up. They make it unique and a little bit more realistic. Rick is the character for which this is not true. We don't really get any kind of resolution on him as a person. This is one of those things I hate bringing up because I don't know the proper way to fix it. And I tend to subscribe to the theory that if you don't have a better idea, then shut up. But we don't really understand, other than the fact he can get a rise out of him, what it is about Angus that Rick just keeps going after. I don't know. To me, if someone has broken my nose multiple times, this would be a person I would say, hey, maybe I shouldn't, egg this person on anymore. Just, that's me. We don't quite ever get a reason outside of the fact that Angus isn't normal. We never quite get a reason why Rick is this antagonistic towards him. What has he got against him outside of the typical, because his picking on Angus goes beyond just, hey, there's a fat kid, I'm going to call him fat. It comes to there's a maliciousness behind it. It is a Draco Malfoy level of, I'm out to get this person, to the point where you get the feeling that he only started dating Melissa to get at Angus. Or that he obviously set it up not caring that he was also humiliating his girlfriend in this prank, all to humiliate Angus. Why? What is the core of it? We get a little bit of it in a scene where Troy is kind of getting at the bullies, and he says that Angus is this great dancer. He's lying, of course. And Angus is this great dancer and is going to blow your ass off the dance floor. And we see a moment of Rick kind of looking concerned. So we get a little subtext there that maybe it's insecurity. Maybe he's intimidated. It's again the dream of every bullied person. They're picking on me not because I was different, but because I'm better. So it could be a thing that he sees how good of a student Angus is. He knows, how good of a football player Angus is, and he's intimidated by him. So it's one of those keep him down will keep me up kind of things. Maybe. You look at probably the greatest bully character, fully fleshed out bully character of all time, again, Draco Malfoy. We understand where it's coming from with him. Now, granted, in that you had 7 books and 8 movies to flush that character out, so I get that. The different 7, 100-page books versus 1 hour and a half movie, but we at least get some kind of motive. We know where mentally he's coming from, and even though we don't ever get a big blow-off, a big handshake and a big speech of Harry and Draco making peace, there is a resolution to that relationship. And I just feel that with so many characters, again, Angus and Melissa being such subversions of their archetype, him being kind of so much just grounded in the villain, so much a villain. For the first time yesterday watching this movie, and maybe just because now we're programmed to look for these things, watching Ariana Richards' performance with him, you get the feeling he may be a little abusive to her. Because there are times that she's looking at him or looking down when he's around, or she's looking past him with almost a look of complete fear. And I was watching it going, holy shit, is she okay? What? I don't know. Again, he does a great job. The character fits the role. It does what it needs to. It's just one of those things that, upon further viewing, it's one of those things that you wish there was at least if we could get a motive. What it is about Angus that ticks this guy off so much. But I don't know how you'd fix that, because if you did that, I think you take away from whose story it actually is, and that's Angus. And these things I've mentioned are nitpicks. This is a phenomenal movie. I have talked about it now longer than I have talked about any movie that I've ever done on any of my review shows. So, it has always been a movie very close to my heart. So a great 90s soundtrack, some great things for the playlist for this series. But it's always made me a little sad that it never quite got the play that it deserved. And I don't know if the people making it, the director, the writer, the actors, I don't know if they ever know that I think in this they made something really special. And I can't speak for anybody else. I can't speak for anyone else who's seen this movie. I know one person in college who saw it and didn't like it. Fair enough. But this movie is very special to me. It's very important to me, and I say thank you to the folks who made Angus, whoever they were. Writers, directors, sound people, actors, to everybody involved in this film, a big thank you from me for making a movie that I feel, and I can safely say now, 20-some years later, rewatching it, it still tells my story and tells it honestly. I'm not a joke in this movie. Again, I draw the comparison to The Big Bang Theory, where the jokes are made at the expense of the nerds. And, I don't feel like I'm being laughed at. I feel like they're telling my story and the story of countless others who always went to school and never quite felt like they fit. And the truth is, they do fit. It's everybody else that just needs to adapt around you. So, I've gone really long on this one. Sorry, not sorry. A lot of points I wanted to talk about. A lot of stuff I wanted to get off my chest with this one. This is why I've saved this one for so long. I love Angus. I will always love Angus. And maybe if you've got some time and you can track it down, maybe you'll love Angus too. So, I think we should wrap this up. This has been a long one. So, as always, folks, keep calm and carry on. And as always, drive safe. And I will see you at the movies.